If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Today we're going to talk about the killing, more like execution, of Donovan Lewis. When you watch the video of the thugs in the Columbus Police Department gun him down, you can't help, of course, but think about Tamir Rice. And the lies that were told by the Columbus PD, they mirror exactly what it is the Cincinnati police did, claiming that, oh, we tried to talk to the guy and there was this long argument, and no, you watch the video and you see the killer, in this case, didn't even wait to see anything. It's like he stuck his head in the door jamb for a split instant, then immediately fired off a shot. The second he saw something that even remotely looked like a person, didn't issue any sort of commands, wasn't sitting there going to some long, drawn-out argument. There were no shots fired, no reason to be firing his weapon at all. He just stuck his head in the door jamb. As soon as he saw something that remotely looked like a person, he just fired a blind shot. Yeah, just like what happened with Breonna Taylor, by the way, just like what happened with Tamir Rice. Police always claim one thing, white media mirrors it, and then we see the video and go, oh, it's exactly the opposite of what they claimed. Now we have to understand two things. The white media is attempting to slither back to the old pattern of demonizing the black victims of police killings. They're trying to figure out if it's soon or too soon for them to go back to that old narrative. They were trying to slow walk their way back to that old narrative of the black person deserved it for reasons, but now they've gone from simply slow walking to a full sprint. They're making sure to slip into their stories that Donovan Lewis had a couple of warrants. Well, as I've documented for you numerous times in my crime report videos on this YouTube channel, the majority of people with crime warrants are white, and you don't see the police just blindly gunning them down, and you don't see the white media justifying it either. Donovan Lewis didn't have a weapon when he was killed. He didn't point anything at the police, never fired a shot, never threw anything in their direction. The police were under no threat whatsoever. This was just like Tamir Rice. Instant that they thought that they saw a person, just stuck his head in the doggone door jamb, bam, just like that. And as for that vape pen claim, the video makes it clear the police didn't actually see that Lewis had anything in his hands or not. They were just making stuff up. But of course, this is part of trying to walk things back to the old normal. It's a matter of, well, we're going back to telling lies, and we think that enough time has passed now that the public is probably not going to punish us like they did 2 years ago. That's what they're doing. The go-to excuse from the police is that they saw something in Donovan Lewis's hands. Now, keep in mind, these scumbag police unions bring in lawyers to coach the cops on what kind of lies they should say after they kill someone. These paid legal prostitutes that these police unions hire tell the cops to use weasel words meant to mislead a jury. For example, they'll tell the jury a phrase like, so-and-so black guy made a furtive gesture. Well, I killed him because he made an overt move. And those are the words they'll use. They won't say that, well, that black guy made a furtively menacing move, or that the black person made an overtly threatening gesture. They just say furtive or overt, and that's it. Now, a jury hears those words and they think, well, that must mean threatening, but the truth is furtive and overt are obscure terms. Most people don't even know what those words mean, which is why these paid legal whores tell the police to use those terms. Now, Merriam-Webster defines furtive as meaning done in a quiet and secretive way to avoid being noticed. So basically, the word means sneaky. And as for overt, that means open to view. In other words, blatant. But blatantly what? Neither of those words means threatening at all. In fact, those words don't actually mean anything. Furtive and overt. Those words basically are a way of saying sorta. He sorta did something. And if this weasel word technique sounds familiar, it should. When the Thug Patrol in Akron, Ohio, yes, the same state of Ohio, executed Jayland Walker, there was video of that murder too. And as I documented for you on this very channel, when the cops in Akron gave their pack of lies to explain away the murder of Jayland Walker, they used phrases like they felt he made a move, they believed, or it appeared to be a muzzle flash. They never made a flat-out declaration. They never made a statement of fact. They just used words and phrases that meant kinda. So this is standard operating procedure for the thugs in blue. They can't tell you what the person they killed actually did that prompted them to shoot them to death, but they use words like furtive and overt, and we felt, and believed, and it seemed, and hopefully your imagination will fill in the blanks. They're getting you to con yourself if they can get you to fall for it. Learn to recognize when someone is talking but not actually saying anything. Death by innuendo is what that is. And the white media will play along with the police line. They will have experts, only experts though, who are going to agree with what the police say. Nobody who's going to point and say, you know what, this is a crock of bull and here's the reason why. They're already attempting to dictate to the public what they ought to think before they even know what happened. See, they can't use the lie that I was afraid for my life. Juries ain't going for that anymore. And as Kim Potter found out the hard way, you're not even going to be able to get away with claiming that, well, I was too confused. I forgot my left from my right. The white media is falling back on the old playbook because these white supremacists don't have any new material. They can't justify the circumstances under which Mr. Lewis was killed, so instead they're trying to dirty him up with things that had absolutely nothing to do with the night in question. And they're also trying to give anti-black racists something that will embolden them to stick up for the thugs in blue. Something they never do with non-black victims of police violence. And speaking of not punishing the police, this is why I told you Merrick Garland's refusal to indict and go after the killers who carried out the actual gunning down of Breonna Taylor, that was a calculated move on Biden's DOJ's part. It was meant to embolden the thugs like the criminals who just executed Donovan Lewis. The message from the Biden DOJ to the police was unmistakable. You could say it was both overt and furtive, and the message was, you'll get in a little trouble if you lie on a search warrant, but if you gun a black person down in cold blood, we're not going to do anything about it at all. It was meant to be a slap on the wrist for Breonna Taylor's killers and a slap in the face to black people. So Biden's DOJ is telling black people that murdering a black person is fine by the DOJ, but if the cops falsify information, that's the only thing that the Justice Department will move on. Lying on paperwork is the crime. Killing a black person isn't. The bad guys are on code, and this code is being pushed from the very top. The police have been steadily killing black people, especially in Ohio, and the police do this as a form of group retaliation. The police in America are basically a nationwide street gang, and they operate that way. When police in Kentucky get arrested and charged, then bad guys in New York or Georgia or Ohio or some other gang of taxpayers-funded street thugs, they'll go and gun down some unarmed black person in their own town. And like any other terrorist organization, when one of their fellow terrorists is captured or otherwise in danger of being punished for their crimes, their fellow travelers will feel they have to do something even bigger, more egregious, just to make the point to the public that, well, we're not going to stop the killings anyway. They're sending a message with these ambush killings, and the message is, we think that enough time has passed since 2020 that we can start testing the public's patience again. We're going to start testing the waters again. And we're going to see if you guys were serious about holding us accountable for killing people, or will you wait till our buddies in the DA's office get around to tell you that there's nothing they can do about it? The uprisings of 2020 were a seminal event. It was an expression of the public's mass determination and focused will. The only reason that the police have been held accountable in the admittedly comparatively few instances that they have been is because in 2020 the public made it clear they would punish police and prosecutors themselves. When it became clear that the public was going to take charge, then you suddenly saw prosecutors who, amazingly, for the first time ever, they were able to bring charges. Oh, we can actually do something. Yeah, because the public made it clear that they were going to punish the prosecutors too. They know they can't rely on juries to throw cases for them, so their goal now is going to be to try to slither their way back to claiming, well, we just can't bring any charges. We're not bringing any charges. And then they'll wait to see if the public revolts. They're testing the electric fence, to use a ranching metaphor, testing to see if they'll get a shock or if nothing will happen. The people showed that they were willing and able to impose their will on the bad guys, and the bad guys were forced to back down 2 years ago. But now that some time has passed, they're doing what they've always done, waiting to see if the people were just blowing off some steam or if that revolutionary energy was going to continue. Was 2020 a flash in the pan or the new normal? Only the people can answer that question. If the people stay on their square, if they pull up and hold these criminals personally accountable, then the bad guys will stay in check. This was why Trump being president was a good thing, because people drew a direct connection between the blatant racism of the government and the violence they were seeing from state and local law enforcement. They knew that they couldn't rely on the government to protect them because you had a blatant white supremacist cheering on the violence. Now, of course, the white media used their propaganda in order to indoctrinate the public to teach them the wrong lesson to take away from the Trump years. The wrong lesson was that Trump was the one driving these events. He was the end-all and be-all of it. And once he's out of office, things are going to get better because they were so much better before Trump took office. That's the lie of it. This was going on long before the Orange Man took office. All these killings of black people, they were going on long before Trump even thought about throwing his Burger King crown in the ring. You see, the problem that the powers that be had with Trump being in there was, with him in the White House, there was no way to deny the situation that people were in. Black folks couldn't deny it anymore. They couldn't sit back and decide that, well, he's not as bad as all that. People were forced to confront the white supremacist hatred that had been simmering and was now boiling over. People understood there was a white supremacist offensive underway, and that if they didn't stop the bad guys, they would be wiped out. There was no way that anyone was going to sit on their hands and wait to see what the government would do about these anti-black killings, because Trump made it excruciatingly obvious that the government was on the side of the white supremacists. But here's the secret. The government's been on the side of the white supremacists long before Trump, and as we see with Biden, they're still on the bad guy's side now. Apathy, sitting back and waiting for someone else to handle it, or thinking you're going to vote your way out of this predicament, that's not an option. People finally realized in 2020 there was no other choice than to take matters into their own hands, which they did, and things finally changed. The people finally realized that the authority has always been in their hands, and the people took their authority and they used it for their own benefit, not just against the thugs in blue, but also against these prosecutors as well. And now the third leg in the stool of racial injustice, the judges are coming under scrutiny, as they should. They have to also be made to be brought to account. And as we leave the thugs in blue with no choice but to rely on the judges to protect them from the law, the same anger that built up from the juries seeing the cops weren't being convicted will also build up against these judges who keep deliberately ignoring the law and giving low sentences for what they know to be blatant acts of murder. Judges who deliberately ignore the law are going to find themselves being held to account. The problem is we seem to be losing the righteous indignation that people had 2 years ago. And why is that? Because now they've been given a placebo in the form of a Democrat in the White House. And the people have deluded themselves into thinking that they can go back to watching TV or goofing off because there's a Democrat in there and somehow that means things are better now. There's not a dime's bit of difference between Democrats and Republicans where black people are concerned. The thugs in blue are increasing their racial ambushes on black people, but instead of hitting the panic button, it's starting to seem like the people are hitting the snooze button instead. They're expecting the same Joe Biden who lied about instituting a police accountability commission, the same Biden who has spent the last 20 months kissing the cops' behinds and declaring that he wants to give the police more money without requiring any sort of punishment for the police or for the police to even institute any changes. People are trying to con themselves into thinking that Biden's going to do something. The great lie that the white media and the Democrats pulled off was to convince people that Trump was the problem in total, and that he was the one driving the violence and no one else. People totally forgot, or at least greatly discounted, that this all started years before under Obama, who did absolutely nothing about it. Anti-black racism is a bipartisan issue. Both major parties support it. And it just goes to show how easily some people will go back to picking the cotton. All it takes is a shriveled up old racist who is just smart enough not to be as openly bigoted as Trump, and people will sit on their hands while the criminals gun them down. That's the choice that the people are presented with now. If they take the authority that they used 2 years ago and continue to use it to ensure their safety and make sure that those who violate their safety are punished to our satisfaction, then they can beat back the demons and finally institute the rule of law. The authority is the people's, not the police's, and certainly not the politicians'. Remember when I told you about how the U.S. Army's definition of legitimacy is authority given by one group to another person or group? Legitimacy doesn't come from the politicians, and damn sure doesn't come from the thugs in blue or the judges. It comes from you, because the authority is yours. You vote to designate someone who you allow to wield your authority, ostensibly so that you can concentrate on doing other things. Now that's fine in theory, but as we see under white supremacy, it simply doesn't work in practice. The people must accept and embrace the fact that they have to do the job of checking the bad guys themselves. You're not going to farm this responsibility out to anyone else. So since the police, prosecutors, and judges have decided to ignore the law and wage war on the people must now exercise their authority to put an end to this lawlessness. On the other hand, if the people choose to go back to their apathy, if they choose to surrender their authority back to the same racist who refused to do what the people told them to do in the first place, then the old life will return. Or rather, the old death. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Alfonso Muhammad, Chaz, Cordelia Dudas, Ginger Vine, and Sandra Bates. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.